On a blistering afternoon in July, on the sun-baked sidewalk outside the Meridian Grand Hotel in downtown Phoenix, a black homeless man named Elijah Reed lifted a cracked plastic cup and asked for water. To the valet drivers in pressed uniforms, to the tourists behind dark sunglasses, to the security guards trained to treat poverty like a threat, Elijah was invisible, just another shadow in the heat. But in less than 1 hour, a single sentence spoken by a woman holding a weathered folder would reveal a 1998 contract that changed everything. A contract that had been buried on purpose. A contract that tied Elijah Reed's name to the fortune of a billionaire who had built his life on pretending Elijah didn't exist. This is a story about dignity, about theft that doesn't look like theft, about how the powerful don't always steal with guns. Sometimes they steal with signatures, building tension. And it starts with a cup of water that never came. Elijah Reed used to be the kind of man who carried water for other people. He'd been a foreman once, running crews in the desert, building what people in Phoenix called the new city. Glass towers, resort hotels, master planned neighborhoods with palm trees that didn't belong in this climate but got planted anyway, because money can make anything look natural. He had hands that told the story, thick knuckles, scar lines across the fingers, calluses from rope and rebar, and tools that didn't care if you were tired. He used to have a home, a small one, a rented duplex near South Mountain, a kitchen where his wife, Alana, would hum while she cooked, a hallway where their son Micah used to race toy cars along the baseboards. But the desert is unforgiving. And so is life when one injury knocks you off the ladder with nothing underneath you. In 2003, Elijah fell from scaffolding on a commercial job site. It wasn't a dramatic fall, 8 feet, maybe 10, but he landed wrong. His back snapped in a way that doesn't heal with willpower. The company's insurance dragged its feet. The work dried up. The bills stacked. The pain made him irritable. The irritability made the marriage fragile. Elijah would tell you he didn't lose everything all at once. He lost it by inches. First he lost the job, then he lost the health, then he lost the wife. Not because she didn't love him, but because love can't always carry the weight of constant fear. And then, worst of all, he lost his son, not to death, but to distance. The kind of distance that grows when you're ashamed to be seen by the people you once promised to protect. By 2016, Elijah was on the street. Not every night. Sometimes shelters, sometimes friends, sometimes an overpass when the weather was dry. But the street became his address, and after a while, the city stopped noticing his presence the same way you stop noticing a crack in the sidewalk you walk over every day. Elijah didn't beg aggressively. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't chase people. He'd learned that if you want to stay alive outside, you don't create reasons for strangers to feel justified in hurting you. So he asked quietly, "Water, please. Just a cup. God bless you." And most of the time, people walked past like he was air. On this day, the heat was different. It was the kind of heat that makes even the rich uncomfortable. 100 degrees and climbing, the sun like a hand pressing down on the back of your neck. The Meridian Grand Hotel's glass facade reflected the sky in a way that looked clean and cool, like it belonged to another planet. Guests drifted in and out through the revolving doors, some holding iced drinks, some laughing, some complaining about the temperature as if it was merely inconvenient and not lethal. A black SUV rolled up to the valet curb at 2017 p.m. The door opened and out stepped Callum Reddick. People in Phoenix called him a self-made billionaire. the founder of Reddick Hospitality Group. The man whose name was on hotels, restaurants, luxury condos, and a charitable foundation that posted glossy photos of ribbon cuttings and oversized checks. He was in his late 50s, silver hair styled perfectly, wearing a pale linen suit like the heat didn't apply to him. His watch gleamed. His sunglasses were expensive enough to cover a month of Elijah's meals. Behind him, an assistant carried a leather portfolio. A security guard stepped out, scanning the sidewalk like they were entering hostile territory. A driver stood by the SUV, posture straight, eyes forward. Callum Reddick was here because the Meridian was hosting an investor luncheon upstairs. People with money talking to people with money about how to make more money. This hotel was his crown jewel, the one he showed to journalists when they asked how he built an empire. Elijah was sitting near the edge of the valet area under the thin shade of a decorative palm. His lips were cracked, his tongue felt thick. He'd been walking all morning to find a public fountain that hadn't been shut off or locked behind customers only signs. He watched the SUV, the suit, the power, and he made a choice. He stood, slowly, because standing hurt. And he approached the valet curb with the cup in his hand. "Sir," Elijah said, voice hoarse, "could I get some water? Just a cup. It's real hot today." Callum Reddick didn't even turn his head. He walked past Elijah as if Elijah hadn't spoken at all. But his security guard did turn. And the guard's eyes didn't hold cruelty exactly, just the practiced emptiness of someone trained to remove problems. "Move along," the guard said. Elijah's throat tightened. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just need water." "Go," the guard repeated louder. A valet looked away. A couple walking into the hotel glanced at Elijah with discomfort and then sped up, as if compassion might be contagious. Elijah held up the cup again, not begging, asking. And then Callum Reddick finally looked. He glanced at Elijah's clothes, the dust, the sun-cracked skin, the cup, and he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that says, "You are nothing, and I want you to know that I know it." "You people always want something," Reddick said, not quite loud enough for the entire sidewalk, but loud enough for the staff to hear. Elijah flinched like he'd been struck. "I'm not asking for money," Elijah said, "just water." Reddick shrugged, turning away. "Then go find a fountain." "I'm not running a charity on my doorstep." And he walked into the Meridian Grand like the air conditioning belonged to him by birthright. Elijah stood there for a moment, holding his cup, and felt something deeper than thirst. Humiliation. The kind that sinks into your bones because it reminds you that in this world even water can become a privilege. The security guard stepped forward like a wall. Last warning. Elijah backed away slowly, his hands shaking. Not from fear, from anger. He didn't let himself show. Because Elijah Reed knew something that man didn't. He knew Callum Reddick's voice. He knew his gait. He knew his face, older now, polished by money, but still recognizable to someone who'd once stood beside him in a trailer office under desert heat, drafting plans that would later become fortunes. Elijah returned to his spot beneath the palm and sat down hard, the world spinning slightly. The heat pressed down like a weight. A few feet away, a young woman in a housekeeping uniform watched the entire exchange from the edge of the service entrance. Her name tag read Nina. Her hands were full of towels. Her face held shock, then something like recognition. Not of Elijah's identity, of injustice. Nina hesitated, then disappeared through the service door. 3 minutes later, she returned holding a small bottle of water, half frozen, condensation running down the plastic. She crouched beside Elijah and spoke quietly, like kindness was something she could get in trouble for. "Here," she said, "drink slow. You look like you might pass out." Elijah took the bottle with both hands. He stared at it like it was a miracle. "Thank you," he whispered. Nina looked back toward the hotel entrance where Reddick had gone. Her jaw tightened. "That man," she said, "he owns everything. You'd think he could at least." Elijah swallowed. His voice came out low and steady. "He doesn't own everything." Nina blinked. "What?" Elijah looked at the Meridian's glossy doors, the revolving entrance that seemed to swallow people and spit them out cleaner. "I used to know him," Elijah said, "back when he was hungry." Nina studied Elijah's face. "How?" Elijah didn't answer immediately. He took another sip. His hands stopped shaking. Then he said, 1998. The number landed like a stone. Nina frowned. 1998? Elijah nodded once. "There's a contract from 1998. That contract made him." Nina stared at him, confused, but something in Elijah's voice made her believe he wasn't just rambling. "Elijah," she said carefully, "why would a contract from 1998 matter now?" Elijah's eyes didn't leave the hotel. "Because it's still binding," he said, "and because it proves what he did." Nina's breath caught. "What did he do?" Elijah's voice dropped to a whisper. "He stole my life." What Nina didn't know, what none of the people walking into that hotel knew, was that Elijah Reed had not always been homeless. He had been a partner, a builder, a man whose signature once sat beside Callum Reddick's on a contract that was supposed to protect both of them. And that contract, lost, buried, and hidden, was about to resurface in the one place Callum Reddick could not control. Because inside the Meridian Grand, upstairs in the investor luncheon, a corporate attorney named Dana Klein was about to open a file for routine due diligence. And in that file, she was about to find a reference no one expected. A reference to the 1998 contract, a reference to a name she'd never heard before, Elijah Reed. And when that name entered the room, everything was going to change. The investor luncheon began at 2040 p.m. in a private ballroom on the 32nd floor. Crystal glasses, linen tablecloths, smiling staff moving like ghosts, a slideshow playing images of hotels and resorts, all branded with the Reddick name. Callum Reddick stood at the front, charming and confident. "We're not just selling rooms," he told the investors. "We're selling experiences. We're selling safety. We're selling a feeling. People will pay anything to feel taken care of." "Pardon?" He said it without irony. At the side of the room, Dana Klein flipped through a folder labeled Meridian Expansion, Legacy Liabilities. She was a corporate attorney hired by one of the new investors, a private equity group that demanded absolute clarity before writing checks. Dana had spent her career reading the fine print people hoped no one would read. And something in the folder bothered her. A single line in the property's chain of title history, 1998 JV Agreement, Reddick Reed Profit Participation Clause. Dana's eyebrows rose. "Reed?" She checked again. "Reddick? Reed." Not a typo, not a clerk's error. Her fingers turned the page. Another reference, royalty obligation, disputed. Then a third, confidential settlement attempt, 2009, unresolved. Donna's stomach tightened. Unresolved obligations were the kind of thing that destroyed acquisitions. She leaned toward her client, a quiet man in a navy suit. "Do you know who Reed is?" She whispered. The man frowned. "No, who?" Donna didn't answer. She was already pulling out her phone, sending a quick message to her paralegal. Run a search on Elijah Reed, Phoenix, 1998, joint venture agreement, now. She kept reading. A scanned memo from 2012 appeared in the file. Someone had tried to remove it, but it remained in the digital archive. The memo was short: potential claimant, Elijah Reed. Background, construction foreman. Claims entitlement under 1998 contract. Recommendation, deny existence, no records located. Dana stared at the words. No records located. That phrase was never accidental. It meant someone had looked and wanted to pretend they hadn't. Dana closed the folder slowly, like she was afraid it might explode. Then she looked up at Callum Reddick, smiling at investors, telling them about safety and being taken care of. Dana's voice was calm when she spoke to the private equity representative, but her eyes were sharp. I need to ask a question, she said, right now, in front of everyone. The representative hesitated. Dana, if we don't ask now, she said, we sign a deal blind. He nodded reluctantly. Dana stood. Mr. Reddick, she called, smiling politely. Quick question about legacy liabilities. There's repeated mention of a 1998 joint venture agreement with an Elijah Reed. Can you clarify that obligation for the investor group? The room shifted. Callum Reddick's smile froze for half a second. Just a crack, barely visible unless you were trained to watch for it. Then he laughed lightly, the practiced laugh of a man who had survived 1,000 uncomfortable questions. Oh, that, he said, waving a hand. Ancient history. A minor contractor agreement, no longer relevant. Dana tilted her head. It's listed as a profit participation clause. That's not minor. And it's noted as unresolved. Reddick's smile tightened. There's no claim, no records. It's a clerical artifact. Dana held his gaze. Then it should be easy to provide the contract. Could we see the original? Silence. The investors looked at each other. The staff paused near the walls, suddenly aware that something had changed in the air. Callum Reddick's eyes flicked briefly to his assistant. Then he said, "We don't have it." Dana nodded slowly. "That's a problem." Reddick's voice sharpened slightly. "Miss Klein, with respect, we're in the middle of a presentation. If you have concerns, direct them to our legal team." Dana's expression stayed polite. "I intend to, immediately." She sat down, but her hands were already moving, sending another message. "Find the 1998 contract, any version, county records, archives, anything." She didn't know it yet, but in the lobby downstairs, housekeeping Nina had just made a call of her own. Because Nina had listened to Elijah speak about 1998, and something in her gut had told her this wasn't a delusion. So when she went on break at 3,001 p.m., she walked into the employee locker room, pulled out her phone, and called her uncle. Her uncle's name was Raymond Jackson. He worked for the Maricopa County Recorder's Office. And Nina didn't ask him to do anything illegal. She just asked him one question. "Uncle Ray," she said, "if someone had a contract recorded in 1998, like a joint venture contract, would it show up in public records?" Raymond paused. "If it was recorded, yeah. If it was referenced in a deed, or lien, or UCC filing, why?" Nina swallowed. "I need you to look something up. Name, Elijah Reed. Another name, Callum Reddick. Year, 1998. Raymond sighed. "Girl, this better not be." "It's important," Nina said. "A man outside the hotel, he's homeless. He says there's a contract that made Reddick rich, and I believe him." Raymond was quiet for a moment. "Text me the spelling," he said finally. "I'll see what I can find." At 3:08 p.m., Nina's phone buzzed. A message from her uncle. "I found a reference, not the full contract, but an addendum recorded as Exhibit B to a land option agreement. 1998. Names match. Elijah Reed listed as founding partner. Nina's breath caught. She typed quickly. Can you pull it? Raymond, I can get you the recorded exhibit and the instrument number. Full contract might be in the civil archives or in corporate filings, but this is enough to prove it existed. Nina stared at the message like it was a doorway opening. Then she looked at the clock. 3:40 p.m. Upstairs, investors were still listening to Callum Reddick talk about trust. Downstairs, Elijah Reed was still sitting in the heat, trying to drink water slowly enough not to get sick. Nina didn't hesitate. She walked straight back to Elijah. Elijah, she said, crouching, I found something. He looked up sharply. What? Nina held out her phone. My uncle works at the county recorder's office. He found a recorded addendum from 1998. Your name is on it. Elijah's eyes widened, then softened into something like pain. God, he whispered, it's real. It's still there. Nina nodded. What do we do? Elijah stared at the hotel doors like he could see through them. We do what I should have done a long time ago, he said. We put it in the light. What happened next would split the day in half, because within 15 minutes, Dana Klein's paralegal would call her back with the same instrument number. And Dana Klein, corporate attorney, trained to smell fraud like smoke, would do the one thing Callum Reddick feared more than any protest outside his hotel. She would demand a pause in the deal until the contract was produced. And when Reddick still claimed it didn't exist, Dana would say the words that would freeze him silent on camera. I have it. At 4:07 p.m., Dana Klein stood again in the ballroom. Her voice was calm, controlled, but it carried. Mr. Reddick, she said, my office has obtained a recorded exhibit from 1998 referencing the profit participation clause and listing Elijah Reed as founding partner. Callum Reddick's face was drained of color. I don't know what you think you have, he said, voice tight. But it's not relevant. Dana held up her tablet. It's recorded with the county. It's relevant. The private equity representative leaned forward. Callum, what is this? Reddick's jaw tightened. A misunderstanding. He was a subcontractor. Dana shook her head. Subcontractors are not labeled founding partner, and they don't receive profit participation clauses tied to multiple properties. The room went quiet. Then one investor, an older woman who'd been silent all day, spoke. If this is true, she said, then we are looking at a concealed liability. And if you concealed it, that's fraud. Reddick's voice rose. This is ridiculous. Dana's eyes didn't blink. Then produce the contract. Reddick turned to his assistant, voice low. Get legal. The assistant ran. A camera crew invited by the hotel PR team to capture investor confidence footage stood along the wall, still recording because no one had told them to stop. And that camera caught what happened next. Because at 4:19 p.m., the ballroom doors opened, and in walked Reddick's general counsel, a tall man with tired eyes, carrying a brown folder like it was radioactive. He approached Reddick and whispered something. Reddick's face changed fast, from irritation to fear. He turned to the investors, forcing a smile that now looked like a mask slipping. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, we're going to take a short recess. Dana Klein stood. No, we're not. Reddick's eyes flashed. Excuse me? Dana's voice cut clean through the room. Not until you confirm whether the 1998 contract includes a profit participation clause that you've been ignoring. Not until you confirm whether Elijah Reed has been owed money for decades, and not until you explain why internal memos in your file say deny existence, no records located. The room was silent. Reddick's counsel stepped forward, voice cautious. "Mr. Reddick, we should." Reddick snapped. "Not now." Donna turned to the private equity representative. "I advise you to pause all commitments. If this contract is valid and recorded exhibits suggest it is, you may be acquiring litigation exposure and unpaid obligations." Then, before Reddick could regain control, the older woman investor spoke again, sharper now. "Who is Elijah Reed?" she demanded. And that's when Callum Reddick made his second mistake of the day. His first mistake was ignoring a man asking for water. His second mistake was lying to people who could afford to dig. "He's nobody," Reddick said dismissively. "A disgruntled former worker. A ghost." Dana's eyes narrowed. "Then why is his name in your chain of title?" Reddick's mouth opened, then closed. "Because the truth was this: Elijah Reed wasn't a subcontractor. In 1998, Elijah Reed had been the one with the land connection, the one who knew the owners, the one who negotiated the option rights on a parcel of downtown property before Phoenix exploded into the gold rush it became. Callum Reddick had been broken then, ambitious, desperate, charming. And Elijah, young, skilled, proud, had believed him. They'd formed a joint venture. Elijah put in sweat equity, crews, planning, and connections. Callum put in paperwork and promises. And in 1998, they signed a contract that said in black and white that Elijah would receive profit participation from any developments tied to that original land option. Then, in 2001, when the first project began to print money, Callum Reddick did what men like him do when they see someone they think can't fight back. He froze Elijah out. He changed addresses. He stopped returning calls. He pushed paperwork through lawyers. He buried the contract under layers of corporate restructuring, creating subsidiaries and shell entities that made tracing obligations difficult. And when Elijah got injured in 2003, when life broke him open, Callum didn't just ignore him. He waited, because time is a weapon, and poverty makes people disappear. Elijah Reed became homeless, while Callum Reddick became a billionaire. And Callum told himself a story. Elijah was weak. Elijah fell off. Elijah didn't keep up. Callum didn't call it theft. He called it survival. He called it business. He called it how the world works. But contracts don't care about stories. Contracts care about signatures. And in that ballroom, with investors watching and cameras rolling, Dana Klein made the decision that would end Callum Reddick's reign of denial. She opened her tablet and read from the recorded exhibit. Elijah Reed is listed as founding partner and entitled to profit participation of 2% net operating income from developments derived from the 1998 land option instrument number. Reddick lunged forward. "Stop." Dana didn't stop. And then a voice spoke from the back of the room, quiet but strong. "Don't stop." Everyone turned. At the ballroom door stood Nina, and beside her, escorted by a hotel security supervisor who looked like he didn't know whether to arrest him or apologize, stood Elijah Reed. Elijah had cleaned himself up as best he could. Nina had found him a spare staff polo from Lost and Found. He still looked homeless because homelessness leaves marks that don't disappear with fabric. But when Elijah stepped into that ballroom, something strange happened. People saw him, not as a shadow, as a human being walking into a room full of power. Callum Reddick stared at him as if he'd seen a ghost. "Elijah," Reddick whispered, barely audible. Elijah walked forward slowly. His posture was stiff from injury and age, but his eyes were steady. "You ignored me for water," Elijah said. "But you've been ignoring that contract for 25 years. The investors didn't move. The air felt heavy. The camera kept rolling. Reddick tried to recover. "This is a setup." Elijah's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "No," he said, "this is accountability." Dana Klein stepped aside, letting Elijah approach the front. "Mr. Reed," she said softly, "are you claiming entitlement under the 1998 agreement?" Elijah nodded. "Yes, and I have been for a long time." Reddick's voice rose. "You can't just walk in here." Elijah cut him off calm. "I can, because you built your empire on what I signed." Reddick's counsel leaned toward him, whispering urgently. Reddick's face shifted again, fear mixing with rage. Because he understood what was happening. This wasn't a private dispute anymore. This was on camera. This was in front of investors. This was documented. And for the first time in 25 years, Elijah Reed wasn't a ghost. He was a claimant, a partner, a man with a contract. Dana Klein asked the question that mattered most. "Mr. Reddick," she said, "have you been paying Mr. Reed his profit participation?" Reddick swallowed. "No," he said. The room inhaled sharply. "And why not?" Dana asked. Reddick's voice cracked with anger. "Because he disappeared." Elijah's eyes narrowed. "You disappeared me." Silence. Dana's tone hardened. "This is not a moral debate. This is a contractual obligation. And now, it's a disclosure obligation. Investors need to know whether your financial statements reflected this liability." Reddick's counsel stepped forward, voice controlled. "We will need to suspend this meeting and consult." The older woman investor stood. "No, we need answers now." Reddick's hands trembled slightly on the podium. He looked around the room, searching for allies, but found only calculation. Then, on camera, in front of everyone, Dana said the sentence that ended him. "We will be notifying regulators and initiating legal action to freeze funds until the liability is resolved." Reddick's face went blank, frozen, silent. Because a billionaire can survive bad press, he can survive protests, he can survive criticism. But he cannot survive documents, he cannot survive contracts, he cannot survive truth with a paper trail. In the hours that followed, everything moved faster than Elijah's entire last decade. By 6:03 p.m., the investor group issued a formal notice suspending the deal. By 8:00 p.m., Dana Klein had connected Elijah with an attorney specializing in contract enforcement and corporate fraud. By midnight, the recorded footage of the confrontation leaked online because someone in the ballroom believed the world deserved to see it. And by morning, the headline had spread across the city: "Billionaire hotel owner confronted by homeless partner over 1998 contract." Callum Reddick tried to regain control with a statement. "This is a misunderstanding involving a former contractor. We will address it through proper legal channels." But the statement didn't match the documents, and it didn't match the video. For the first time, reporters started asking questions that weren't about his resorts. They asked about his subsidiaries. They asked about his early deals. They asked about who else might have been cut out. They asked about what happens when the man you ignore on the sidewalk has your name on his paperwork. The legal process was brutal. Reddick's attorneys argued statute of limitations. Elijah's attorney argued ongoing breach and concealed obligation. They argued fraud. They argued tolling. They argued that the contract wasn't lost, it was hidden. And then the court ordered discovery. Discovery is where liars fear the light. Emails, memos, internal notes. The kinds of documents men like Callum Reddick believe they can bury forever. In late August, a smoking gun memo surfaced from 2009, written by a junior attorney who had since retired. Reid claim appears valid. Recommend settlement to avoid public exposure. If settlement refused, strategy should be to deny ability to locate contract, claim Reid abandoned interest. The judge didn't smile when he read it. He didn't need to, because that memo didn't just show breach, it showed intent. It showed concealment. It showed a pattern. And patterns turn civil disputes into criminal investigations. The State Attorney General's office opened an inquiry into financial fraud. The IRS began auditing Reddick Hospitality's disclosures. The investor group filed suit for misrepresentation. And then the board of Reddick Hospitality, men and women who had tolerated arrogance because it made them rich, did what boards always do when the ship starts taking on water. They cut the captain loose. On October 3rd, Callum Reddick was removed as CEO. His resignation letter was cold, corporate, carefully worded. But the footage remained. The moment he froze remained. The moment he said, "He's nobody," remained. And Elijah Reid, once ignored for water, sat in a lawyer's office wearing a clean shirt, holding a copy of the 1998 contract, and watching the world finally read what he'd been trying to say for years. The settlement came in December. Elijah did not receive a fantasy outcome. He did not become a billionaire. He did not buy the hotel. He did not get revenge in the way movies sell revenge. He got something better. He got justice. A structured settlement totaling $4 million, representing back pay, estimated profits, and penalties for concealment paid into a trust with oversight, medical coverage, housing, a stipend, and funding for a small foundation. Elijah insisted on creating for homeless outreach and heat relief in Phoenix. That foundation opened its first water station right outside the Meridian Grand Hotel. A simple dispenser, cold water. No questions, no humiliation. A sign beside it read, "Water is not charity. Water is dignity." Elijah moved into a small one-bedroom apartment near a community clinic. He attended physical therapy twice a week. He got consistent medical care for the first time in years. He gained weight slowly, the healthy kind. And one afternoon, 6 months after the settlement, he received a call that shook him harder than any courtroom victory. His son, Micah, now 26. "Dad?" Micah's voice was cautious, guarded, like a man stepping toward an old wound. Elijah closed his eyes. "Yeah, son, it's me." There was silence, then a shaky breath. "I saw the video," Micah said. "I didn't know. I didn't know what happened to you. Mom, she said you left. She said you." Elijah swallowed pain. "I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I was ashamed, because I fell apart. And I thought you were better off not seeing me like that." Micah's voice cracked. "You should have let me decide that." Elijah nodded, tears in his eyes, though Micah couldn't see it. "You're right. I want to see you," Micah said. If you're okay with that." Elijah's voice barely held steady. "I've been waiting for that call my whole life." They met the next week, father and son, sitting in a small diner, talking slowly, carefully. Healing isn't a miracle, it's a process. But they started, and the man who'd once been invisible on the sidewalk began to be seen again. Not by strangers, not by investors, but by the one person whose eyes mattered most. Callum Reddick, meanwhile, faced consequences that money couldn't fully erase. He paid restitution, he lost investor trust, he watched his empire restructure under new leadership, his foundation quietly removed his name. And though he avoided prison through plea negotiations related to financial disclosure issues, he lived with the one punishment arrogant men fear most. His legend died. He was no longer self-made. He was exposed. He was a man who had stepped over a thirsty person and built an empire on a hidden signature. This story reminds us that the world is full of people we've been trained to ignore. We see them on sidewalks, on corners, at bus stops, outside hotels with gleaming doors and cold air inside. And we tell ourselves a story. They did this to themselves. They're lazy. They're nobody. But sometimes that nobody has a history you can't imagine. Sometimes that nobody has a contract you can't outspend. Sometimes that nobody has been carrying the truth for 25 years, waiting for one crack in the wall of power. Elijah Reed didn't become rich overnight. He didn't become famous. He didn't become untouchable. He got something better. He got his name back. He got his dignity back. He got the truth, documented, verified, undeniable. And he used it not to crush people, but to build something that would keep others alive in the heat. Because Elijah understood something Callum Reddick never did. Wealth is temporary. Power is borrowed. But character is what you do when someone asks you for water. So ask yourself, if you had been standing outside that hotel, what would you have done? Would you have looked away? Would you have let the guard handle it? Would you have told yourself it wasn't your problem? Or would you have been Nina, the person who saw a human being, offered water, and helped bring the truth into the light? Because one day, you might be the one thirsty, not for water, for justice, for dignity, for someone to see you. This story is a fictional dramatization inspired by real events of exploitation, lost opportunity, and the power of human dignity. In a world that often rewards greed and punishes the vulnerable, choose to be like Elijah Reed. Choose the truth, choose resilience, choose grace. And if someone asks you for water, give it, because sometimes the smallest kindness becomes the first step toward unbelievable justice.